Within the REI's investment analysis platform, you can reimburse any general expenses back to a tenant. This is common on commercial leases, retail centers, office, and industrial centers. To add in a reimbursable expense, please go to the Expense tab. On the Expense tab, you can add in property management fee as a percent of the gross scheduled income, the gross operating income, base rent, or base rent plus reimbursables. You also have a checkmark box where you can indicate if the expense is reimbursable or not. This is the same for the General Expenses table, which is in the middle of the screen. Here you can add in any general expense. You can change the name to whatever you desire. You can add in the annual expense amount, the annual increase, and you have a checkbox to indicate whether the expense is reimbursable or not. When you add your expense, please note that the word is reimbursable. They are not yet reimbursed. Each expense can be checkmarked as reimbursable, but you then must set the tenant reimbursement schedule for each individual tenant before the expense is reimbursed. In the example on the screen, you can see we have our CAM charges at $40,000, increasing at 2%, and it is checked as reimbursable. If I check my Projections tab on my annual property operating data, I can see my rental income, yet there is no expense reimbursement income. And my expenses are showing up as a debit on my APOD. This is because by default, each tenant has a reimbursement schedule set to none. To have our expense reimbursements show up on our projections, we need to go to the Income tab, and we need to open up the Lease Renewals button and select each of our individual tenants. In this case, we have a single tenant, Verizon, and down at the bottom we can see we have a expense reimbursement type drop down bar. Here we can set the reimbursement schedule for each tenant. By default, it will be none. If they are sharing expenses based on a pro rata share of the square footage that they occupy, you can select that amount. You can also add in a base stop amount or a percent of the overall expenses. In this case, we will select our pro rata share. I can close my lease renewals box, go back to my projections, and now you see your expense reimbursements appear as a credit or a rental income item, and then have them debited down below as an expense with a net effect of a zero sum on the ledger. Again, to reimburse expenses, you must first check mark each individual expense as reimbursable, and then go to the Income tab and set the lease renewal reimbursement schedule for each individual tenant.